Last Tuesday, the Amhara Association of America, or AAA, released a new report on gross human rights violations in the context of the war in Ethiopia's Amhara region. The Amhara people have been victims of ethnic-based violence by both state and non-state actors for decades. However, this violence intensified when the Oromo Prosperity Party, led by Abiy Ahmed, came to power in 2000. In 2023, millions of people took to the streets to protest this violence. But instead of addressing the people's concerns, the Abiy regime declared war on the Amhara people. Over the past 16 months, AAA has documented numerous abuses against the Amhara people despite a communications blackout by the regime. AAA believes these human rights violations meet the legal definition of a genocide. One of AAA's core missions is to investigate, document, and report on human rights violations, and to use this evidence to educate stakeholders such as the US government, the African Union, the United Nations, and various human rights organizations, and to push for policy changes that hold perpetrators accountable and seek justice for the victims of the Amhara genocide.
AAA's new report covers human rights violations in the 12 months since the state of emergency in Amhara region was announced in early August 2023. The report covered 16 zone and city administrations in the region and in surrounding areas. The report identified trends of abuses such as massacres, conflict-related sexual violence, arbitrary arrests, property destruction, communication restrictions, and internal displacement. During this period, AAA recorded over 3,300 civilian casualties, including 2,600 people killed and 700 injured. The majority of these casualties were accounted for in civilian massacres, of which AAA identified 200. In addition, AAA recorded 53 deadly drone strikes, which accounted for more than 550 civilian casualties. AAA additionally recorded 270 cases of rape, which predominantly victimized young girls and women, and in some cases, young boys and male priests. The report identified perpetrators of these abuses, which included state forces at the federal and regional levels, as well as non-state armed groups. These include the Ethiopian National Defense Force, or ENDF, Regional Riot Dispersal Forces, militias, and police, Oromia Region Special Forces, or OSF, the Oromo Liberation Army, or OLA, and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF. The report also documents that thousands of civilians were profiled and arrested for their Amhara identity and/or political views. AAA identified several waves of mass arrests since the state of emergency was announced. However, mass arrests also preceded this period, including in early April 2023, when large-scale anti-regime protests took place in Amhara region, and prior to that in May of 2022. Initial arrests targeted opposition figures, independent journalists, lawyers, medical doctors, students, human rights activists, and others. Identity-based arrests were also documented in the northern Amhara areas of Raya and Alemt, where TPLF, in collusion with federal forces, profiled residents suspected of opposing the Tigray settler administration, which was imposed by force starting from April 2024. Lastly, identity-based arrests were documented in various parts of Oromia region by the OSF and ENDF, often following periods of genocidal violence against Amhara communities by these groups, as well as by the OLA.
AAA's report has uncovered widespread identity-based attacks against Amhara civilians. It also presents evidence that shows that the human rights violations happening in Amhara region amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity, which means that the Amhara genocide that was happening in Oromia region primarily has now been expanded into Amhara region, which is why we plead with international actors to raise alarm on the situation in Amhara region and do all they can to prevent more damage and casualty among civilians. We in particular urge the African Union to establish a fact-finding mission to Ethiopia and the United Nations Human Rights Council to establish an independent investigative commission to investigate these atrocities against Amhara people in Ethiopia. We also urge the United Nations agencies to step up their humanitarian aid and Western countries to increase their humanitarian aid assistance to Amhara people in Ethiopia. We also plea with other human rights organizations to conduct their own independent investigation to bring more evidence forward about these atrocities against Amhara civilians in Ethiopia.